Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into NuviaLab Vitality.
Okay.
This is a supplement that I've seen around a bit,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
got some pretty bold claims about men's health and vitality.
Uh-huh.
So we've got a bunch of their marketing materials and even a few customer testimonials,
Okay.
and we're going to try to unpack it all and see if this product, lives up to the hype.
Right.
One of the first things I noticed that I thought was interesting is that NuviaLab Vitality is available in 17 countries.
Wow.
We're talking Hong Kong, Singapore.
Mhm.
It seems to have like a pretty big global reach.
That's right. Yeah, it's definitely not just a regional product. And the marketing for this, it really leans into that global kind of ambition
Yeah.
with phrases like, unveiling boundless reservoirs of energy and treasure trove of benefits.
Yeah, it's very dramatic language, isn't it? You almost feel like you're
Mhm.
missing out on some secret energy source
Yeah.
if you don't try it. But, okay, before we get too swept away by all the marketing and the magic, let's just break down what NuviaLab Vitality actually is.
Yeah. So they describe it as a multi-ingredient food supplement. And it's designed for men who are looking to, boost their overall vitality and health. And they really emphasize the natural aspect a lot, focusing on plant extracts and vitamins and minerals.
Yeah, they've got a whole list of ingredients, and they've all got those little trademark symbols next to them, like, Enostem, Bioperina, Aquamin Embreg, Selenium Celesti.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're trying to make it sound like really exclusive or something.
Right.
But let's move on to what they're actually claiming this stuff can do. They say it increases energy and vitality. They even say it can help you, quote, extract boundless layers of energy hidden inside you.
Yeah, that's one of their more evocative phrases for sure. They also talk about fertility support and increased sexual desire,
Hmm?
which are both pretty common claims you see with these kinds of supplements.
It seems like they're kind of targeting those anxieties that, men might have about getting older,
Absolutely.
especially when it comes to, virility and performance.
Totally. And they talk about testosterone support as well, although they're careful to frame it as like maintaining correct levels,
Right.
not just boosting them, sky high.
Interesting. It sounds like they're trying to strike a balance between appealing to guys who are looking for that boost,
Mm-hmm.
but also like, wanting to sound at least somewhat responsible about it.
Right.
They also mentioned muscle function support, which makes me think they're maybe trying to appeal to athletes or
Yeah.
men who are, physically active.
Yeah, it does seem like they're casting a pretty wide net in terms of, who they're trying to reach.
Yeah.
Men of all ages and lifestyles who might be feeling that, decrease in energy or vitality.
Now, they do use phrases like scientifically proven effectiveness throughout their marketing materials,
Mm.
but I'm guessing we need to, look at those claims with a critical eye.
You are absolutely right. It's really important to remember this is marketing material, okay? This isn't a peer-reviewed scientific study.
Hmm.
And they actually put a lot of emphasis on Siberian ginseng
Okay.
and all its supposed benefits, particularly for, increasing sperm motility and testosterone production.
Siberian ginseng sounds powerful.
Yeah.
I've heard of ginseng, but
Yeah.
is there actually scientific evidence to back up those claims?
So there is some research on Siberian ginseng, but it's important to distinguish that from other types of ginseng, like, Korean ginseng,
Okay.
which is actually also in this supplement.
Uh-huh.
Siberian ginseng has been used in traditional medicine for like centuries, especially in Russia and China.
Wow.
But when it comes to the specific claims that NuviaLab Vitality is making, the evidence there is much more limited.
Okay, so we need to be cautious about just taking those claims at face value. I mean, it's easy to get kind of caught up in all the marketing hype, especially when you're talking about something as, personal as men's health.
Mm-hmm.
But let's maybe shift gears a little bit and talk about one ingredient that really caught my eye.
Okay.
Enostem. What is this stuff? What's it doing in their formula?
So Enostem is interesting because it's not just a single ingredient. It's like a proprietary blend of extracts
Okay.
from apple skins, grape mark, and saffron.
Mm.
And they say it improves blood flow, which is particularly relevant to their claims about, enhancing erectile function.
Right. So they're playing up that connection between blood flow and erectile function.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But if it's a proprietary blend, does that make it harder to actually know how effective it is?
Yeah, that's one of the tricky things about these proprietary blends. It can be tough to figure out the exact dosage of each ingredient and how they might interact with each other. It's a bit of a black box, to be honest.
Okay.
They do say that Enostem works by activating nitric oxide synthesis.
Nitric oxide. Now, I remember hearing about that. Can you remind us what exactly that is and why it matters in this context?
Sure. So nitric oxide is a molecule that plays a really key role in vasodilation,
Okay.
which basically means the widening of blood vessels. And this widening allows for more blood flow throughout the body,
Hmm.
including to the penis, which is, of course, crucial for achieving and maintaining an erection.
Gotcha. So by activating this nitric oxide synthesis, they're saying that enostemmer can help to improve blood flow and therefore potentially,
Yeah.
lead to better erectile function.
Hmm.
And actually, they mentioned a study
Yeah.
involving 94 men, all 45 or older, that supposedly showed improvements in, erection hardness
Hmm.
and overall sexual function after taking enostemmer. That sounds pretty promising, right?
Well, it might sound that way on the surface, but we have to be careful about interpreting these findings. We don't actually have access to the full study details, like their methodology. Was it published in a reputable journal? We just don't know.
So we can't really judge how reliable these results are without having more information. It's like reading a headline without the article. You
Mm.
only get a very small piece of the story.
Exactly.
Speaking of stories, let's move on to those customer testimonials.
Okay.
We have 3 included here: John, Martin, and Oliver. And they all seem to be pretty happy with NuviaLab Vitality.
Yeah, they all describe a pretty positive experience with the product.
Yeah?
Oliver even mentions that his, quote, lady friend isn't complaining anymore, which I thought was kind of a funny uh, choice of words.
Yeah, that one definitely stood out to me as well. It's certainly a colorful way to describe the supposed benefits.
Yeah.
But as we've talked about before,
Yeah,
personal anecdotes and testimonials, they shouldn't be taken as like definitive proof that something works.
absolutely. Individual experiences can vary so much. And testimonials, they're often cherry-picked to highlight the positive outcomes, so you're not really getting the full picture. So they're interesting to hear these stories, but they're just one perspective, not necessarily everybody's experience.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground already. We've unpacked the marketing claims. We've looked at some of the key ingredients. We've even discussed those interesting testimonials. But now I'm curious, based on everything we've seen, who do you think NuviaLab Vitality is really targeting? Who's their ideal customer?
Well, based on their messaging and the benefits they highlight, it seems pretty clear they're going after men who are experiencing, age-related decline
Mm.
in energy, vitality, and sexual function. They use phrases like solution for the modern man
Right.
and, regain your natural vitality. It all plays into those anxieties that men might have about getting older, losing that youthful vigor.
Yeah, it's interesting how they really play on those insecurities, promising a way to, like, reclaim that lost vitality. It really speaks to the pressures that, men often face to maintain a certain level of performance as they age.
Totally. They're tapping into those cultural expectations and offering this, seemingly simple solution in a bottle.
Mm.
And that's where it gets a bit more complicated, I think,
Yeah.
because it raises questions about how we view aging and masculinity as a society. Like, what does it mean to age gracefully as a man?
Right.
Is it even possible to regain your youthful vitality, or is that just like an unrealistic expectation?
Those are some really thought-provoking questions, and I think they're worth exploring further. It's not
Yeah.
just about this specific product. It's about the bigger messages that it reflects.
Exactly. NuviaLab Vitality is just one example of this growing trend in the supplement industry that targets these anxieties men have about aging and performance. And I think it's important to really unpack those messages and look critically at the claims being made.
Well said. And that's exactly what we're going to do in the next part of our deep dives. We're going to explore those broader societal implications and really dig into the science, or lack thereof, behind these kinds of supplements.
Looking forward to it.
Stay tuned.
Yeah. So before we went to that little break, we were talking about the ingredients in NuviaLab Vitality.
Yeah.
And you might remember that Siberian ginseng was featured pretty prominently in their marketing.
Yeah, they made it sound like it was like a miracle cure for pretty much everything.
Mm.
Boosting energy,
Mm-hmm.
enhancing fertility, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious, what does the actual research say about Siberian ginseng? Like, how effective is it really?
Well, like I said before, it's really important to make that distinction between Siberian ginseng and other types of ginseng.
Right.
Like, it's been used in traditional medicine for centuries, but the scientific evidence, to back up a lot of those traditional uses, it can be pretty limited.
So just because something has been used for a long time doesn't necessarily mean it actually works.
Exactly. And when it comes to the specific claims NuviaLab Vitality is making,
Uh,
the evidence is even thinner.
okay.
So, for example, they talk about Siberian ginseng and how it can increase sperm motility.
Okay.
There was one study published in the Journal of Urology that looked into this,
Okay.
and they were looking at men with infertility.
Hmm.
And they gave them Siberian ginseng, and while it did show a slight improvement in sperm motility
Okay.
for the guys taking the ginseng compared to the placebo group,
Hmm.
the study itself was really small, only 40 participants.
Okay, so a small study with, like, modest results. That doesn't really, you know,
Right.
scream miracle cure to me.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to really dig into these studies, not just take the marketing claims at face value.
Right.
Another claim they make is that Siberian ginseng can boost testosterone levels.
Okay.
But there was a review of multiple studies that was published in the journal Phytomedicine.
Mm.
And they looked at all this research and they concluded that the evidence supporting that claim is just inconclusive.
So basically, we still don't really know if Siberian ginseng can actually have a real impact on testosterone.
Yeah, the jury's still out on that one.
Okay.
And it really highlights, again, the need for more rigorous research to figure out if Siberian ginseng really lives up to the hype, especially when it comes to these very specific claims being made by these supplement companies.
Sounds like we need to maintain a healthy dose of skepticism.
I think that's always a good approach.
Now, speaking of ingredients, we're also talking about that proprietary blend,
Yeah,
Enostom.
right.
Before the break, you mentioned that it's got extracts from apple skins, grape mark, and saffron. What's the science behind these individual components? Like, what do we know about them?
Well, each of them has been studied to a certain extent.
Okay.
Apple skin extract, for example, it's rich in polyphenols. Those are antioxidants, and they've been linked to all sorts of health benefits. But the research specifically on apple skin extract and its impact on, blood flow or erectile function is limited.
So we're back to that lack of concrete evidence.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Okay.
Grape mark extract, which is another ingredient in Enostim.
Okay.
It's also rich in polyphenols.
Okay.
And there's some promising research there, especially looking at its potential cardiovascular benefits.
Okay.
But again, when you look at studies that directly connect it to improvements in erectile function, not a lot to go on there.
And what about saffron? I know that it's a spice, but I've heard about it having, medicinal properties too.
Yeah, saffron's pretty interesting. It's been used in traditional medicine for a long time, and there is growing interest in its potential therapeutic uses.
Uh-huh.
Some small studies have suggested that it might help with mood and even cognitive function.
Okay.
And there's even some very preliminary research looking at its possible role in erectile dysfunction.
Huh.
But again, more research is needed.
So it seems like we're seeing a pattern here
Yeah.
of intriguing possibilities, but not necessarily enough solid evidence to really know for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like the supplement industry really relies on these little snippets of research
Mm-hmm.
to make their products sound effective,
Right.
even when the full story is way more complicated.
Absolutely. They highlight the potential benefits of these individual components, but they don't always give you the full context
Yeah.
or acknowledge the limitations of the research.
And I think it's easy for people to get caught up in all that excitement, especially when they're dealing with, these sensitive health concerns.
Oh, yeah, for sure. People are looking for solutions, and they're often willing to try, whatever promises to help. But it's so crucial to be critical and not just believe everything you read in the marketing.
It's like that saying, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Exactly.
Now, before we move on from Enostump, I want to go back to that study they mentioned,
Yeah.
the one with the 94 men, all 45 and older. We talked about needing more info to really judge how reliable it is. What specific things would you be looking for, if you had access to the full study?
Well, the first thing I'd want to know is, who conducted this research?
Okay.
And were there any potential conflicts of interest? Was it funded by the company that makes Enostim?
Ah, okay.
Because that could definitely introduce bias. I'd also be scrutinizing the methodology.
What?
Was it randomized? Double-blind, placebo-controlled? That's really the gold standard when it comes to clinical research.
Gotcha.
And then, what were the actual outcomes they were measuring? How did they measure them? And were the results statistically significant?
So it's a lot more than just, like the headline results,
Yeah.
right? It's about really understanding how the research was done
Exactly.
and what it all really means.
And even if a study is well designed
Yeah.
and the results are statistically significant,
Hmm.
it's important to remember that one study doesn't prove anything for sure. You need replication. You need multiple studies confirming those findings before you can really say with confidence, okay, this ingredient or this blend actually does what they say it does.
So replication is key. That makes sense. So if somebody is listening to this and they're genuinely interested in learning more about, these ingredients, what would you recommend? Should they just like ignore everything they read in the marketing materials?
I wouldn't say ignore everything,
Okay.
but I would encourage them to go beyond the marketing and do a little digging themselves.
Hmm.
Look for independent research on, Siberian ginseng, apple skin extract, grape mark extract, saffron, all of that.
And any tips on where to find like reliable information?
Yeah, there are some great resources out there. PubMed, which is a database of like biomedical literature.
Okay.
That's a great place to start. And then there's examine.com. They have a ton of evidence-based information on supplements.
Okay, great advice. Knowledge is power, right?
That's
Now, let's switch gears a bit and talk about the overall safety of NuviaLab Vitality. Did you find any like red flags in your research?
From what I've seen, the ingredients are generally considered safe for most adults
Okay.
when taken as directed. But of course, like with any supplement, there's always the chance of, someone having a sensitivity to something, or maybe it interacts with a medication they're taking.
So it's always a good idea to check with your doctor before starting any new supplement,
Oh, absolutely. Always, always.
especially if you've got, pre-existing health conditions or you're on other meds.
Definitely. And I think it's also important to note that the long-term effects of taking NuviaLab Vitality,
Yeah.
they haven't really been studied in depth. So we just don't know a lot about the potential risks or benefits of taking it for a long period of time.
So that's something to keep in mind as well.
Mm-hmm.
So where does all of this leave us in terms of like our overall assessment of NuviaLab Vitality?
Well, they're clearly making some big claims about, boosting vitality and energy and sexual function. And some of the individual ingredients have shown promise, at least in some early research, but the evidence is still limited, especially when it comes to those specific claims they're making.
So we're not saying it's a total scam,
Right.
but we're also not ready to give it our, full endorsement.
Exactly. We need more research to know for sure if NuviaLab Vitality can really do what they say it can do. And until then,
Mm-hmm.
I think healthy skepticism is the best approach.
Sounds like a good plan.
Yeah.
But you know what I think is really interesting about this whole, deep dive we've been doing?
What's that?
It's not really just about the supplement itself. It's about these bigger conversations it brings up,
Oh, yeah.
about aging and masculinity and the expectations that men face, like to perform at a certain level.
That's a great point.
Like imagine if this product actually did live up to all its promises.
Right.
What would that mean for how we think about aging and what we expect from men?
That's a really complex question. It gets into some pretty deep societal norms and beliefs.
And those are the kinds of questions that, I find fascinating.
Right.
But before we go too far down that rabbit hole, I think it's time to wrap up this part of our deep dive. We've talked about the science, we've looked at the claims, and we've explored some of those bigger, societal questions.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground today.
But the conversation doesn't end here.
No, definitely not.
In our final segment, we're going to go even deeper into those societal implications. We'll talk about what a product like NuviaLab Vitality really says about, our anxieties and how the definition of masculinity is changing. Stay tuned for the thought-provoking conclusion to our deep dive into NuviaLab Vitality. Welcome back, everyone. So we've spent a lot of time talking about NuviaLab Vitality, going through the marketing, looking at the science, even, those customer testimonials. But I think what's really stayed with me throughout this whole deep dive is that bigger picture. Like, what does this product and others like it, what do they tell us about how our society views aging, especially for men?
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, the supplement industry often really plays on those anxieties people have about getting older.
Yeah.
And for men especially, there's often this message that, getting older is something you have to fight against. Like it's this decline that you need to reverse.
Exactly. And NuviaLab Vitality, they seem to be doing that, right?
With all this talk about, endless energy and renewed vitality and even better sexual performance, it makes you think, like, what if this stuff actually worked the way they say it does,
Hmm.
what would that mean for how we view aging as a society?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Would it reinforce the idea that, men have to maintain a certain level of performance,
Yeah.
virility, even as they get older? Would it just create more pressure to fit into those, idealized ideas of what it means to be masculine, even when, our bodies naturally change over time?
And could it lead to a kind of ageism almost, where guys who haven't managed to achieve that enhanced vitality?
Are seen as like somehow less than, less desirable. It's
Yeah.
almost like we're setting an impossible standard.
Yeah, it's definitely a slippery slope. And I think it's so important to remember that, aging is a natural process. Everyone goes through it.
Right.
It's just part of life. And we don't need to be so focused on like chasing after some, perfect image of youth.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
True vitality, to me, it means embracing all those different stages of life.
Hmm.
Finding joy in every chapter
Yeah.
and realizing that our value doesn't come from, our physical abilities or how well we fit into these societal expectations.
I couldn't agree more. It's about that overall well-being,
Mm.
physical and mental,
Mm.
and recognizing that, aging brings its own unique strengths, its own wisdom.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into NuviaLab Vitality, I guess I'm left with a feeling of like cautious optimism. On the one hand, I'm always a little skeptical of these products that make big promises based on, not a lot of evidence.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I think it's been really valuable to have this conversation,
Oh, for sure.
to really think about aging and masculinity and, all the pressures that we face.
Yeah, and that's what I love about these deep dives.
Mm.
It's not just about picking apart one specific product. It's about using it to explore these bigger societal trends
Right.
and to challenge our own assumptions.
Absolutely. So for everyone listening out there, I hope you walk away from this feeling empowered,
Yeah.
to question the messages you see, to do your own research, and to ultimately make informed decisions about your own health and well-being,
Hmm.
free from the pressure of those unrealistic expectations.
Remember, true vitality comes from living a life that's authentic and meaningful to you.
Well said. And until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.